Fixing your life does not begin with motivation, discipline, or optimism. It begins with honesty, radical, uncomfortable honesty. Most lives remain broken not because people lack potential, but because they refuse to confront the parts of themselves that sabotage that potential. They chase improvement while avoiding responsibility. And they seek change while protecting the very patterns that keep them trapped. The first practice is to stop lying to yourself. Every repeated problem in your life carries a message. If the same relationships fail, if the same anxieties return, if the same dissatisfaction follows you from place to place, the issue is not fate, it is an unexamined inner structure. Life repeats lessons until consciousness catches up. What you refuse to face externally will emerge internally as anxiety, resentment, or exhaustion. The second practice is to reclaim responsibility for your inner world. You may not have chosen your wounds, your upbringing, or your early conditioning, but you are choosing every day whether those forces continue to rule you. Blame keeps you psychologically young. Responsibility matures you. The moment you stop asking, "Who did this to me?" and begin asking, "What is this asking of me?" your life starts reorganizing itself. Third, bring order to the small things. Chaos in the outer world mirrors confusion within. Clean your space. Regulate your sleep. Care for your body. These are not trivial acts. They are symbolic declarations that your life matters. When you treat your daily environment with respect, your psyche receives the message that you are worth protecting. Order is not control, it is self-respect made visible. Fourth, confront your shadow. Within you live impulses you deny, emotions you suppress, strengths you are afraid to embody, and anger you have never expressed consciously. What is rejected does not disappear, it becomes destructive. When you refuse to integrate your darker aspects, they emerge unconsciously through self-sabotage, passive aggression, or destructive relationships. Wholeness is not becoming good, it is becoming complete. The fifth practice is to develop a relationship with suffering instead of running from it. Pain is not an error in life. As designed, it is the mechanism of transformation. Every meaningful change requires the death of an old identity. If you numb discomfort, you numb growth. If you listen to pain, it becomes guidance. The question is never, how do I avoid suffering? But what is this suffering shaping me into? 6. Speak truth even when your voice shakes. Unspoken truths turn into psychological poison. When you silence yourself to preserve comfort, your body carries the cost. Boundaries, honesty, and self-expression are not acts of aggression, they are acts of alignment. Life lived out of alignment will always feel heavy, no matter how successful it appears from the outside. 7th, choose a meaningful aim and orient your life toward it. Meaning organizes chaos, pleasure fades, status collapses. But meaning sustains effort in the face of difficulty. Your aim does not need to be grand, it needs to be genuine. When your actions serve something larger than immediate gratification, your life gains coherence. 8th, stop waiting to feel ready. Readiness is a myth created by fear. Action precedes clarity. Confidence is born from movement, not thought. The psyche reshapes itself through behavior. Each small, disciplined action rewires your identity from the inside out. 9th, withdraw energy from what drains you. Not every relationship, habit, or desire deserves your life force. What you repeatedly give attention to becomes psychologically dominant. Choose carefully what you feed, because you are always becoming what you nourish. Finally, accept that fixing your life is not a single decision. It is a daily confrontation. You will fail, you will regress, and you will begin again. The goal is not perfection, but consciousness. When you live consciously, even your mistakes move you forward. Your life does not need to be saved, it needs to be faced. And the moment you stop running from yourself, you discover that the strength you were searching for has been waiting within you all along. Radical self-honesty is not a skill, it is a confrontation with the parts of yourself you have spent a lifetime avoiding. Most people live in a state of quiet deception, not because they are consciously lying, but because they have learned to protect themselves from discomfort. Every avoided truth, every denial, creates a layer of psychological armor that shapes how you perceive the world and how the world responds to you. Self-honesty begins with recognizing these layers and refusing to accept their authority over your life. It requires looking at your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors without excuses, without rationalizations, and without the comforting narratives that soften reality. When you are radically honest, you acknowledge your fear, your envy, your anger, and your shame, not as flaws to hide, but as signals that something within you is unresolved. It demands that you examine the patterns you have inherited from your family, culture, and society, and ask whether these patterns truly serve you or whether they are scripts you are merely performing. It is easier to live in the illusion of progress, to believe that your actions align with your values, than to confront the dissonance between your intentions and your reality. Radical self-honesty tears away that illusion. It forces you to face the fact that your habits, your relationships, and your choices are reflections of your inner state, and until you address that state, no external change can be genuine or lasting. Being honest with yourself also means accepting responsibility for the ways you have contributed to your difficulties. You may have been conditioned, misled, or hurt, but your life is continuously shaped by the choices you make in response to those conditions. Self-honesty strips away blame and excuses, revealing the power you have to respond consciously rather than react unconsciously. It requires listening to the subtle whispers of discomfort and curiosity in your mind and body, noticing when you are avoiding an uncomfortable truth, and allowing that recognition to guide your behavior. Each moment of acknowledgement, no matter how small, strengthens the capacity for conscious action. It also illuminates the areas where you are still acting out of fear or ego, revealing the parts of yourself that have been dormant or suppressed. Radical self-honesty is not a one-time event, but a lifelong practice. It is the continuous effort to see yourself clearly, to notice when self-deception arises, and to act with awareness even when the truth is painful or inconvenient. It is not about judgment. It is about clarity. It is the recognition that your growth, your freedom, and your ability to live a meaningful life depend entirely on your willingness to confront reality as it is, starting with the reality within yourself. In the absence of this honesty, every action is compromised, every relationship is distorted, and every achievement feels hollow, because you are constructing your life on a foundation of illusions rather than truth. Radical self-honesty is the seed from which transformation grows, and until you cultivate it, change remains superficial, fleeting, and ultimately unrealized. Responsibility is the cornerstone of psychological maturity, the invisible force that separates those who live consciously from those who drift through life as passive observers. To take responsibility is not merely to complete tasks or honor obligations. It is to claim ownership of your thoughts, emotions, and choices, even when they are uncomfortable or inconvenient. Many people mistake responsibility for blame, believing that if they acknowledge their role in life as challenges, they are admitting fault or weakness. True responsibility, however, is the opposite of blame. It is the recognition that while you may not control the circumstances you inherit, you always control your response. When you refuse responsibility, you remain in the grip of victimhood, a state in which external forces dictate your identity, your feelings, and your potential. Victimhood thrives on denial, excuses, and projection, creating the illusion that life happens to you rather than through you. Each refusal to take responsibility deepens this illusion, reinforcing patterns of dependency, resentment, and powerlessness. The psyche matures only when you confront this tendency, when you stop asking, "Why me?" and begin asking, "What is mine to do here?" Responsibility demands courage because it exposes you to the discomfort of seeing yourself clearly. It forces you to examine your habitual reactions, your avoidance strategies, and the ways you unconsciously perpetuate suffering in your own life. It requires that you face your fears and desires without rationalization, understanding that the freedom to act intentionally is inseparable from the willingness to accept the consequences of your actions. This acceptance transforms internal chaos into clarity. By owning your life, you create a sense of agency that is inherently liberating. Decisions that once seemed overwhelming become opportunities for growth, and challenges that previously provoked despair become lessons in self-mastery. Responsibility reshapes the psyche by dissolving the psychological safety net of blame, revealing the deeper truth that external conditions can only shape you to the extent that you allow them. The moment you internalize this truth, victimhood loses its grip, and you begin to experience life as an active participant rather than a passive spectator. Every choice you make, no matter how small, becomes a statement of autonomy and a reflection of your evolving consciousness. Even when failure occurs, it is no longer a mark of inadequacy, but a mirror showing where further growth is required. Responsibility is not about control in the sense of domination over circumstances. It is control over your inner world, your intentions, and your ability to act with integrity. Each is patience, humility, and self-awareness, because the recognition of your role in life as unfolding requires continuous reflection and adaptation. It transforms fear into accountability and inertia into action, enabling you to navigate complexity with a steady and centered mind. The psyche that embraces responsibility becomes resilient, flexible, and capable of depth because it no longer relies on illusions of innocence or victimhood for survival. Instead, it learns that empowerment arises from conscious participation, that suffering can be endured and transcended through choice, and that life's difficulties are invitations to exercise strength, wisdom, and discernment. Responsibility is the gateway through which the psyche matures, and through which the chains of victimhood are finally broken, leaving a mind capable of genuine freedom and self-directed evolution. Outer order is not merely a matter of tidiness or aesthetics. It is the visible expression of inner clarity and self-respect. The spaces we inhabit, the objects we surround ourselves with, and the routines we maintain are mirrors of the mind. When your environment is chaotic, cluttered, or neglected, it silently reinforces confusion, indecision, and a diminished sense of worth. Disorder externalizes unresolved inner tension, creating a feedback loop in which the mind and environment perpetuate each other's instability. Conversely, when you cultivate outer order, you send a message to your psyche that you value yourself, your time, and your energy. This is not about perfection or rigid control. It is about conscious alignment. Every small act of organization, cleaning your workspace, arranging your belongings, maintaining consistent habits, is a declaration that your life deserves respect. Outer order functions as a language through which the unconscious mind receives guidance. When your surroundings are orderly, you are less distracted by unnecessary stimuli, and your mental space becomes available for reflection, focus, and intentional action. The act of organizing external life cultivates discipline internally, trains attention, sharpens decision-making, and strengthens the connection between thought and action. The simple act of putting things in their rightful place teaches a deeper lesson, that everything in life, including yourself, has a place and a purpose. Outer order also communicates boundaries to others. A cluttered, chaotic environment invites intrusion, disarray, and disrespect, while an organized space signals that you care about what you allow into your life. This external discipline shapes the way others interact with you, and more importantly, the way you interact with yourself. Self-respect is not abstract, it is enacted. Maintaining outer order is a practical form of self-respect because it requires consistent attention, reflection, and care. It demonstrates that your life matters enough to be curated and that your time, energy, and attention are not to be squandered on chaos. Furthermore, outer order cultivates emotional resilience. When the external world is arranged in alignment with your values and priorities, you reduce the friction of unnecessary stressors and distractions. You create a stable framework within which decisions, creativity, and personal growth can occur. Clarity of environment encourages clarity of thought. When you can see the space around you clearly, you can see your options, priorities, and responsibilities clearly. Chaos clouds perception, while order illuminates it. Even in moments of emotional turbulence, an orderly environment provides an anchor, a tangible representation of stability and intentionality. Outer order is not a superficial or trivial pursuit, it is deeply psychological. It is the translation of self-awareness into action and the embodiment of respect for oneself and one's life. Each object in its place, each routine maintained, each decision made with conscious attention reinforces the understanding that your inner world deserves care and clarity. By cultivating order externally, you cultivate it internally. Your environment becomes a teacher, a mirror, and a support system for your psychological well-being. The clarity you create outside resonates within, strengthening identity, focus, and self-worth, and enabling a life lived with intentionality, presence, and dignity. Within every person exists a hidden dimension of the psyche, a set of impulses, emotions, and tendencies that are denied, suppressed, or disowned. This is often called the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we judge, fear, or reject because they conflict with our conscious identity or societal expectation. Ignoring the shadow does not eliminate it. It allows it to operate unconsciously, influencing thoughts, behaviors, and decisions in ways that often lead to self-sabotage. People who refuse to confront their shadow may repeatedly engage in destructive relationships, procrastinate on meaningful goals, or make choices that undermine their own well-being, all while believing they are acting rationally. Integrating the shadow is not about becoming perfect or eliminating flaws. It is about acknowledging these hidden parts, understanding their origin and purpose, and finding a way to consciously engage with them. Each rejected aspect carries energy and intelligence. Anger, envy, fear, and desire, when denied, may erupt unpredictably, distorting judgment and creating conflict. Yet, when recognized and consciously expressed, they can guide decision-making and provide vital insight into personal needs and motivation. Shadow integration involves observing one's reactions, noticing recurring patterns of avoidance, projection, or self-criticism, and questioning the narratives that justify these behaviors. For example, a person who repeatedly pushes away opportunities may be avoiding failure, disappointment, or exposure of vulnerability. The shadow contains these fears, and until they are consciously acknowledged, the behaviors driven by them will continue. This process requires courage because it involves looking at parts of oneself that may feel shameful, socially unacceptable, or frightening. It demands honesty, patience, and the willingness to sit with discomfort without immediately attempting to suppress it. Over time, integrating the shadow transforms these unconscious drivers into conscious tools. Anger becomes assertiveness, fear becomes caution without paralysis, and desire becomes motivation aligned with personal values rather than compulsion. By embracing the shadow, individuals reclaim the energy and insight that were previously hidden or misdirected, dramatically reducing patterns of self-sabotage. Furthermore, shadow integration strengthens emotional resilience and self-understanding. When you accept that negative feelings or impulses are not evidence of weakness, but signals of unmet needs or unresolved experiences, you stop fighting yourself internally. You respond to challenges with awareness rather than reaction, and your choices become more aligned with your authentic self. It also deepens empathy and relational capacity because recognizing and accepting your own hidden aspects allows you to perceive others with greater nuance and patience. The shadow, once integrated, no longer operates as a hidden saboteur, but as a source of energy, creativity, and self-knowledge. Self-sabotage diminishes because the unconscious conflicts that fueled it are brought into consciousness and consciously addressed. This is not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing practice. Life will continue to present situations that trigger denial, fear, or projection, and the shadow will always exist in some form. Yet, with consistent self-reflection and integration, the patterns of self-sabotage weaken, giving rise to a psyche that is more coherent, intentional, and empowered. In essence, confronting and integrating the shadow is the path to mastering oneself, transforming inner conflict into conscious strength, and turning the hidden drivers of self-destruction into allies of growth, creativity, and freedom. Suffering is often misunderstood as a punishment, a flaw in life, or an obstacle to be avoided at all costs, yet it is one of the most potent instruments of transformation available to the human psyche. Pain, loss, disappointment, and struggle are not signs that life is failing you. They are signals that something within you requires attention, growth, or integration. When approached consciously, suffering becomes a guide, revealing hidden truths about yourself, your attachments, and the structures of your mind. Most people react to suffering with avoidance, distraction, or denial, seeking to numb discomfort rather than confront it. In doing so, they miss the opportunity to examine the meaning beneath the pain, and the same lessons recur in new forms until they are faced. Suffering has a language of its own. It communicates what is unresolved, what is denied, and what is misaligned with your authentic life. Whether it is physical, emotional, or psychological, pain points toward areas where your identity, values, or choices are incomplete or unconscious. It exposes illusions of control, pride, and avoidance, forcing a confrontation with reality as it is rather than as you wish it to be. Transformation begins when suffering is recognized not as a threat, but as a teacher. The discomfort of loss, rejection, or failure cracks open the familiar shell of identity, revealing layers of fear, resistance, or unconscious patterns that have been shaping your behavior. This exposure is uncomfortable, even frightening, because it challenges the narratives that maintain a sense of security, competence, or self-worth. Yet within this challenge lies opportunity. By allowing suffering to be examined, reflected upon, and integrated, you cultivate resilience, self-awareness, and clarity. Each painful experience carries the potential to reshape priorities, values, and relationships in ways that comfort alone never could. Suffering fosters depth because it forces the psyche to encounter the full spectrum of human experience, including vulnerability, uncertainty, and mortality. When approached with presence, it teaches patience, humility, and discernment. It exposes attachments that no longer serve, patterns that limit freedom, and beliefs that constrict growth. Through this process, what once felt like torment becomes a catalyst for insight and action, prompting changes that align life more closely with authenticity and meaning. Transformation through suffering also involves choice. You cannot always choose the experiences that challenge you, but you can choose how you respond to them. Resistance and denial prolong pain and entrench maladaptive patterns, while conscious engagement, reflection, and acceptance accelerate growth and open doors to new possibilities. In this way, suffering is not your enemy. It is the instrument by which consciousness expands, identity matures, and life deepens. Those who embrace suffering with awareness develop a capacity for endurance, clarity, and wisdom that comfort and pleasure alone cannot provide. The wounds, hardships, and trials of life, when approached with attention and courage, become the architects of transformation, shaping character, revealing purpose, and strengthening the ability to navigate existence with resilience, depth, and presence. Suffering, understood in this way, is a crucible through which the psyche is refined, the soul is awakened, and the individual moves closer to wholeness and self-mastery. Meaningful action is the bridge between intention and identity, the tangible expression of who you are and who you are becoming. Without action, thoughts and intentions remain abstract, floating in the mind as ideas or desires that never crystallize into reality. When actions are meaningful, aligned with values, purpose, or personal vision, they do more than achieve goals. They reshape the very structure of the self. Identity is not fixed. It is continuously constructed and reconstructed through choices and behaviors. Each deliberate action reinforces certain aspects of the psyche while diminishing others, creating patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior that solidify into a coherent sense of self. In contrast, actions that are reactive, aimless, or driven by external pressure reinforce a fragmented, shallow, or false identity. Meaningful action requires awareness and intentionality. It involves discerning which efforts truly reflect your priorities and which are distractions or performances for the approval of others. This discernment is critical because identity is not merely what you think you are, but what you enact in the world consistently over time. Every step taken in alignment with your values strengthens confidence, self-trust, and internal coherence. The direction of your life emerges naturally from these choices because action creates momentum. While reflection, planning, and dreaming are important, they are incomplete without execution. Meaningful action transforms abstract desires into lived reality, and through this process, priorities become clarified, capabilities are discovered, and potential is realized. The effects of action are cumulative. Small, consistent acts aligned with purpose gradually alter habits, thought patterns, and emotional responses, reshaping identity in subtle yet profound ways. A person who consistently acts with integrity, for example, begins to internalize integrity as part of their self-concept, which then influences decisions, relationships, and perceptions of the world. Similarly, action directed toward growth, learning, or contribution builds competence, resilience, and self-efficacy, creating a feedback loop where identity and capability mutually reinforce one another. Meaningful action also shapes the trajectory of life by generating consequences and opportunities that would not exist otherwise. Life responds to engagement, potential becomes actualized, relationships deepen, and challenges emerge that are suited to the evolving self. Without action, even the clearest intention remains unrealized, leaving a sense of stagnation, frustration, or unfulfilled potential. Furthermore, meaningful action requires courage because it often involves risk, discomfort, and the possibility of failure. To act in alignment with one, as true values, is to confront uncertainty and resist conformity. And yet it is precisely through this confrontation that the self is forged. By embracing action despite fear or hesitation, The psyche grows stronger, more integrated, and capable of navigating complexity with discernment and authenticity. Over time, the accumulation of purposeful deeds defines both the identity and direction of a life. Who you are becomes inseparable from what you do, and where you are headed becomes a natural consequence of your consistent, intentional engagement with the world. Action, therefore, is not merely a means to an end. It is the instrument by which consciousness, character, and life itself are shaped, giving substance to intention and clarity to purpose, while continuously molding identity and guiding the unfolding journey of existence. As you embrace these practices, remember that transformation is not instantaneous, nor is it ever truly complete. Life will continue to challenge you, to test your honesty, responsibility, awareness, and courage. But each time you confront yourself, each time you act with intention, each time you face your shadow instead of running, you reclaim a piece of your power. The life you seek, one of clarity, purpose, and fulfillment, is not something that happens to you. It is something you create moment by moment through conscious choice. Commit to showing up for yourself, to embracing the discomfort, and to acting meaningfully, and you will discover that the strength, wisdom, and freedom you have been seeking were within you all along. Your life can be extraordinary, but only if you step fully into the work of becoming the person you were always meant to be.